Good morning and happy Friday, episode number 95 on Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust, coming to you from the KCAV studios, Kansas City Audio Visual. They can take care of all of your office needs, any project, big time stuff too. I'm the little guy here, but they were able to help me build this studio, the lighting, the audio. Still working out some kinks and all that in this social distancing era, but really happy to be here and running a couple minutes late. Usually I'm running a couple of minutes late just because that's me, unfortunately. But I got to say, the reason why we were running late today was just our panel was having such a good time talking. It kind of reminds me of people say, "What goes on during commercial breaks?" I'll say, "Oh, you have no idea the conversations we're having on TV." By the way, it's opening day today, which I actually have a little bit of that feel. It's not that same feel of waking up and saying the fans are coming back to the ballpark, because they're not. But having done baseball for the first time in my life with no one in the stadium, not just fans, but I mean, the team is gone. We did 2 games the last 2 nights that would have been rained out, but we were in the rain, undercover, and the team was in Detroit, and it all worked out. And so tonight the Royals play their first home game. I am so excited about that. But I get to start off my day with 4 awesome people. Let me make sure that I have everybody in here, because I got to do a little bit of extra work with this panel. It's a growing family, because we initially had 3 members. Now we bring in 4. So I welcome to Rounding the Bases Live Cass Butler, Nicole Silvey, Chandra Clark, and the one dude in the group, André Davis. And now the big question is, good morning, everybody, is, last time we did this, we talked a lot about racial injustice. And, I think that all of us, in some of the most fun emails that go back and forth ever, we said, well, how can we advance the discussion? Like, we could have the same discussion that we had last time, and that might be okay, but there's so much more to talk about. There wasn't enough time last time. There won't be enough time this time, so we're going to keep doing this. And so what we want to talk about is I think, Andre, which you dubbed in an email to me, allyship. How black and brown people can use those white allies, how we can help fight for equality. So before we get into that discussion, let's go around the horn and introduce who everybody is again, and what your title is. And so I'm on the hot seat here now, because it's like, well, who do I have go first? I know who doesn't
Dr. Butler.
Go. I know who doesn't want to go first. Dr. Butler's the new one in the group, but that's fine. Cass Butler, welcome to the group. Tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Joel. And yes, just Cass will do fine. I am a higher education executive, and so I work at Webster University, and I have an operational and marketing responsibility.
Okay, so Cass, so good to have you here with us. We got to go ladies first. I'll go up to of course. Let's go to Chandra.
Good morning, Joel and everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Chandra Clark. I work for Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I'm the Director of Community Outreach. And Big Brothers Big Sisters is a nonprofit organization serving youth.
And I know Andre's on the board, and guess what? Next time I have you guys on, we might be doing a little bit of fundraising, because I'm competitive, and that's a whole other thing that's coming up soon. Chandra, you all know what I'm talking about, I think. All right, Nicole, You're up next.
Good morning, Joel. Thank you for having us back. I'm Nicole Silvey. I'm the president and founder of Connection Coach KC. I help people build their networks, just as you were mentioning, as well as assisting not-for-profit organizations build their recruitment and retention strategies for people of color on their boards of directors.
All right, Nicole, good to have. I got a message from Nicole earlier this week with a flashback Facebook post of when we actually first met, not knowing we'd be doing all this type of stuff in terms of podcasting. A year ago, it was, I think, probably a year flashback, and she and her husband were at the Royals game, and so it was kind of I don't know if it was a bittersweet moment. It was probably more of a sad one of we want to be at baseball, but I'm glad that you're here. All right, last but not least, the handsome one in the group. Let's go, Andre.
That's right. Hey, man, welcome. Hey, glad to be back. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. So André Davis, I've been involved in the corporate community for about 20 years, 20 plus years, serving the nonprofit, for-profit businesses and leadership capacities for a number of years, and presently working for a company called Built, which is an interior construction firm, but we deploy a prefabricated construction solution, and we build custom interiors. So we're doing a lot of work. So Wellsky is one of our projects, Mariner Corporate Headquarters is one of our projects, and then the first prefab hospital ever built in the city, Kansas City Orthopedic Institute, is also one of our projects. And so my role was to go out and do what we're doing here and try to solve problems leveraging construction. So that's kind of what we do. And it's an honor to be back in front of this crowd. I'm going to try and be quiet because I think the three of you are going to knock it out the box, and I'm just going to listen like Joel and try to play my part and maybe zip it up if I can with the stuff. But in this crowd, there's not much that I need to say with this audience. So.
Well, Andre and I are very much like that. We're talkers and we struggle to zip it up. I will do my best and just keep things moving here in whatever direction they go. That's the beauty of it. I know we've talked about wanting to have organic conversations, and you guys know as well as anyone, I think that, and I'm just getting to know Cass, that I'm not a rehearsed questions and here it goes where it goes. I should not add one more person to the panel, but someone that is truly here almost every single show, although she disappeared on me for a week. She's been really, really busy. I call her like my little sister or my little daughter or whatever it is, but you all know Kiana.
Of course.
She's been, she's been getting me pumped up for this. I mean, I was getting text messages the moment that I got off the air last night. Let's go tomorrow morning. Let's go. So, Kiana, you know, we love you. And
not shocked to hear that.
And our friend Aaron Falk says, I think I know the Big Brothers Big Sisters secret.
Aaron's always in the know.
Aaron's always in the know. I mean, let's just keep that one a secret for now. I wonder what it could be. All right. Let's get to this. And now I got to figure out where to start. And I am going to go to Chandra first. And let's talk a little bit about advancing this, because here's what I think. There are a couple things that have happened in my mind. And in my, I'm struggling to talk this morning. In my opinion, we're making progress. You guys, I would love your take on that. But I also feel like, and I was afraid of this when we had our discussion last month, that the news cycle changes and we move on to other things. And that's just the way. So it is a responsibility to keep this on the forefront. And to me, Chandra, there are a lot of people out there that either want to help, like myself, I'm talking about white people, or that still don't fully understand it. Forget about the Confederate flag waving, flat out obvious racists. I think it's going to take another generation or two to hopefully get to their kids, or more likely their grandkids. It's going way too slow for them. I'm not saying they have no hope, but I think there are a lot of people that do have hope that don't fully understand it, that can be allies. So let's start with that and your thought on allyship.
So I think I shared this with the group when we were kind of discussing this topic. My first mentor was a white man, and having him as a mentor actually changed my life, because before I had him as a mentor, I really approached my life as though I was a liability. I didn't see myself as an asset. And he really helped me look beyond my own perspective, because he was a white male and he viewed life from a limitless perspective. So he really introduced me actually to the power of networking. He was the inspiration behind me starting my first LinkedIn profile. He actually taught me how to set goals for building connections and contacts, but he also helped me understand the importance of building up my confidence as a Black woman. And I share that story because what really was transformative was because he was a white male and so he had a different life experience, and he helped me think outside of the box. And so going back to what you said, Joel, I think it's so important for those white allies that if they want to help, to be vulnerable enough to state that they want to help, and be vulnerable enough to put themselves in a position to help, but also to be vulnerable enough to deal with some of the difficulties and maybe the adversity that comes from being an ally.
It's an interesting story too, and just to see how that affected your life. Cass Butler, how about for you? And we're so glad that you have joined the conversation. But let's talk a little bit more about allies. What are you seeing out there? What are you hearing right now? How can more people that look like me get involved, understand more, and make an impact?
We're glad to be here, Joel. But I would say some of the ways that I'm seeing allies in my circle or people that I have access to use their power is with, first of all, healthy dialogue with me. So not wanting to debate the things that I've gone through or my experiences or my understanding, but really get a different perspective that they've never considered. And then taking that and challenging their own peer groups, more white women specifically that look like them, about the history of Black people, about our challenges, about how they can be better support to us and use their access or privilege to really shake up the room. And so I'm seeing quite a bit of that. I've got one good friend in particular who's been a very strong ally who really wanted to understand microaggressions. And I get it. People are a little uncomfortable coming to speak to us about these things because they never know how it's going to be received. But she wanted to know, like, what are some examples that really annoy or offend Black people? And one of them that immediately jumped to mind for me, and Andre, you probably get this a lot too, is when you think of someone like Barack Obama, you say, he's so well-spoken. Like, that's one of the first things that you say about a man who's worked so hard to pave his path, is that he speaks so well. You know, in the past, I might have said, well, as opposed to what?
Right.
But now it's why is that a shock to you? Let's talk more about that. And so she really wanted to understand those types of things that they can do to support us as allies, so they can just kind of get away from those subtle racisms, where they're advertent or inadvertent, that kind of give us a lot of pause.
So, Cass, I want to further that question because I know as a white man that there's just, whether there are racist tropes or not, there's no way that I am going to describe a Black man or a Black woman as intelligent or, oh, they're well-spoken. He or she is well-spoken. Now, if someone says that about a white person, it probably doesn't register that way. So what I want to do in advancing your point, because I think that there are a lot of people out there that don't want to go down. Now, some of them, without even realizing it, are being racist, right? Mm-hmm. Some of them are, maybe they don't realize it, but they don't want to do that. And so the question is, if you're wanting to acknowledge someone's intelligence, the reality of it is we could come up with 1,000 words for Barack Obama and intelligent would fit. I think you could just call him the boss. And by the way, if you don't or didn't like his politics, let's acknowledge just watching his eulogy yesterday for the hero, John Lewis, that this is an amazing person. Okay, you're a Republican or you don't like his views, that's fine. So what's the best approach then for someone that is white? Well, André Davis is a really smart guy, without going into the trap of saying something that has racist undertones.
So would you like me to answer that?
Please.
Okay. So, everyone is going to be different. I can only speak from my perspective. I think that others might have a bit of a different idea, but, ask about my background. I think that might be a healthier way to start that conversation, instead of being surprised about it. Just, let's explore my background and where I've come from and how I've gotten to where I've gotten, perhaps. I think that might be a healthier exchange than to speak about something so surface that could apply to really all of us.
Yeah.
Well, and all right, Nicole, I'm letting you warm up. I'll let you go last. I mean, the reality of it is, anybody that sees Andre is going to say, "Man, that's a good looking guy there." And, no, I'm messing
that's
with
right.
Andre. I'll let all the women on here talk about that. No, but the discussion about just these conversations. I mean, I'll get back, and I know, Andre, you and I have talked about this before. It's an uncomfortable conversation between, say, a black person or a person of color and a white person, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, I've found, and you were one of the first. Okay, for all those people that say, "Well, I have a black friend," okay, we know that that's usually pretty dangerous too. But for me, when I picked up the phone and you said, "Hey, let's talk," and that whatever we had 30 minutes scheduled turned into 2 hours, it gave me the confidence to sit there and say, not only can I have these conversations, I want to have these conversations. So I think a lot of people are wondering, Andre, like, how do they start that? Because the reality of it is that first moment is going to be a little bit awkward, or it might be.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And Cass summed it up well. I think we've all had experiences where someone might have described someone as well-spoken. And for us of color, it cringes us, right? Because the suggestion is that when I physically put my eyes on you, I didn't think you were intelligent. And then you started to talk, and I was like, oh, you're different than what I thought, right? And so we have to recognize that bias. And so that's part of it. The other thing I think we have to think about is when not make it about you. So if you're white and you really want to engage people of color, don't make it about you. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. And make it about the person. And if we all approach this moment that we're in, because we're all in this moment together, if we approach this moment in what I call shared humanity, and all that simply means is you care about your fellow human being, right? Regardless of color, and you want to get involved, and you're seeing things that are not right. If you just stick to that model, then it's an easier path towards being able to be what we call an ally, or someone that is going to help and use their influence to right a wrong. It's also about having perspective and empathy, right? So if you have a greater perspective about other people of color, what they've gone through, like Cass said, instead of saying I'm well-spoken, maybe ask, hey, where did you go to school? What college did you go to? What did you do after that? Ask more questions like that. Don't assume. And I think that's the challenge is we take our lens and we live in our own zip codes and we see people that only look like us. And then when we encounter someone that looks different, then we have to start asking all these questions. Oh my God, I'm shocked. You really speak well. Well, why would you be shocked? So what that screams to me is that you're not around other people that don't look like you, because there are tons of people that are educated and don't talk like what you see on the news at 10:15 running out of a 7-Eleven or Quick Trip and all that. That's not the makeup. Everyone of color is not oppressed. Everyone of color is not committing crime. There are a ton of people of color doing really, really superb things in this country and this city. And so I think we have to get there. The challenge with that is we haven't experienced that. So our perception is what we either see in media, TV, we read an article, or whatever it might be. We heard something from a neighbor 9 doors down, and he said something. You're like, oh, that's right. That's what I've heard. That's what I read. We can't do that any longer. And it's time for people like Joel, because you're using your platform, which I appreciate. We can't just say, hey, you know what? That's wrong. It requires action. You can't sit on the sidelines any longer. You have to get involved. And so just know it's going to be uncomfortable. Understand the criticism you might get, and be okay with that. And again, if you don't make it about yourself, you're going to be okay with the criticism. You're going to be okay with the learning. When you were in school, you didn't know everything. It was awkward, uncomfortable. You were asking your neighbor. At least I was. I was looking at people's sheets and trying to figure out how they got the answer. You're going to have to do that, and you're going to have to humble yourself to understand what people of color are going through in this country.
Well, I mean, how often do we hear people say, I have it all figured out? Nobody does. Everybody talks about how they learn every day. So why shouldn't this be a learning situation for everyone? And, you know, I have found myself noticing more when I've been around a group which has involved social distancing. I've sort of closed all that off right now with baseball starting and saying, you know what, I'm going to wait this out. And I'm trying to be very deliberate. But I now notice when there is a room full of white people or one black person, and I try to sit there and walk in those shoes and say, wait a minute, is this one person of color going to be the one person that speaks up, or can I help with the discussion here now?
Right.
Not that I've walked in those shoes, but if I could be that ally, and you guys know this, I don't, this doesn't need to be look at Joel's got all this figured out, but I do think that I can play a part here because of these types of conversations, whether it's private with Andre and I or public like this, where I'm learning every single time. And now instead of that black friend that could sit there and speak out and feel really awkward, I could start the conversation. And so,
Right.
We've got this message here from Tammy. Allies should also alert other white folk when they commit clear microaggressions, help them learn, know better, and be better. Nicole, I do think a lot of people want to be better, but they can't if they don't understand it.
That's so true. I like to start with, I really assume good intention. And I noticed after, of course, Mr. Floyd's death, more people outwardly said, what can I do to help? And we talked about, does that fall on the shoulders of people of color, or how does that happen? And what I've noticed is allies are the ones who acknowledge that there is, first off, that racism still exists, and then sees their unique position and opportunity to help people of color with access and opportunities that we may ordinarily not have. And that's a really slippery slope because it's rooted in shared power, because what we don't want is for someone to take the mic and share our stories on behalf of communities of color, but instead share the mic and elevate the voices that are there. And that's a really unique position to be in. I think of examples of true allyship is being in a meeting and I may be one of the only people of color and often one of the only women. But if I share an idea, having another, maybe a white male, take that idea and say the exact same thing I've said, and an ally will call attention to that and say, isn't that similar to what Nicole said? Or yes, that's piggybacking on what Nicole said.
100%.
Or that value is identified, that space is held for us and uplifted. I talk a lot about being at the table, and really I've kind of even changed that. Sometimes it's just getting in the room sometimes is what we have access to, and we're not truly at the table. That's where we want to be, so that we have that ability to really affect and influence and make change. And our good friend, all of us are friends with Gadir Garcia of the Brand Lab, and something that I love that she calls all the time into play when we're talking about allyship. An ally is someone who is going to be an activist, who's going to stand alongside an individual, but an accomplice is what we really need to further this work. And an accomplice is going to get in the work with you. Like John Lewis said, that good work, that good trouble, that's where we need our accomplices to be, at the root of dismantling racism and getting at the core and heart of why systemic oppression exists. And so there's many aspects to allyship we wouldn't be here, all four of us have commented on, if not for the allies that have helped pave the way. But if we don't look at the system that has led to white people being the gatekeepers, that we can't access those situations on our own, we're going to continue to persist in the way that we have in the last, I don't know how many years. So I think that's where allies can play a key role.
Well, let's further this discussion a little bit, because I am curious, since we had our panel, it was 7 weeks ago, I believe, to the day.
Wow.
How much change, and I know that, Cass, you weren't here with that group, but you've watched the last 7 weeks, the last 3 months, 4 months, and a lifetime for that matter, too. How much has changed? Have these conversations become easier with those white allies, or those that you don't know are white allies yet? Have these conversations become more open or easier, or no?
I feel like they have become easier. They're definitely more frequent. Allies are asking a lot more questions. I always challenge anyone that asks me questions that pertain to the Black race in particular, not just me, to do your homework, do your research, because I don't want to spoon feed anything to you. It's my experience versus an entire, population of people. And so, the same way you would vigorously research, salsa dancing or Italian cooking or whatever it might be that's happening, that's popular. And I hate to use that, but it's very current and in the moment. You do that homework to figure out more about it. Do the same thing with any question or anything you want to know about the experience, about allyship, about any of those things. But definitely, I'd say the conversations are a lot more frequent, And I think because it's coming from a very sincere place, it's not uncomfortable. And I don't think any one of us want to make anyone uncomfortable. I think that we all sincerely want to advance and change what's happening. So I don't think it's uncomfortable at all.
There's some people I'd like to make uncomfortable, but they're the ones that are hiding behind a fake picture on Twitter that I really would love to just meet and have a discussion with. But we all know that that's a rabbit hole that's not worth anyone's time. Unfortunately, I find myself getting sucked into that sometimes. But you know what? I actually want to, because I feel like when I see that stuff, first off, if there is an opportunity to speak out, like if it's someone that actually has a name and a title next to them, I'm going to call them out on it. And I'm willing to have that fight. I really am. But I also want to feel some of that hatred. You know, there's so much of that out there now that I think surfaces. And by the way, this is true as someone that sees more anti-Semitism now than I did as a kid, with someone with the last name Goldberg that's Jewish. I didn't see a whole lot of that as a kid. Really easy to do that stuff right now when you can hide behind a fake name. So I do actually like to go down that rabbit hole, even though it's infuriating and a waste of time and counterproductive, only because it reminds me to keep this on the radar, that there is so much hate out there. The flip side of that is there's a lot of good, and we need to be able to highlight that. So Chandra, I want to go up to you, and I think we'll just go around the horn here, so to speak, and see what's changed or what you've seen in the last 7 weeks in terms of allyship.
So I remember, Joel, in our last conversation, I talked to you in the group just about this whole idea of why now. And that's really been the conversation that I've been having with friends and, allies. Is I want it to be change that lasts a lifetime, not just popularity, not a propaganda word that I've been using. So I can say that I do believe that there have been a lot of people that desire to be a part of the team and are having those authentic conversations. But I'll be honest with you that I'm still a bit of a skeptic, because again, I think that racism is, we all know that it's rooted in hatred. And this has been centuries and years of pain and oppression. And so I feel like oftentimes in society, we, pick a topic and it's popular and it's fun and it's cool and we all want to move around it. And so I'm having these conversations about, are you really ready to dig in and do the work that it takes? Because it is painful work. It is painful when you're talking about other people's trauma. It's painful when you're talking about other people's pain. And for you to really be an ally, you really have to be empathetic. There's no way that you can walk in that person's shoes, but you have to be empathetic. So, for example, one of my friends is, she's doing an event tomorrow, and a portion of the proceeds will benefit Big Brothers Big Sisters. And that really is out of the kindness of her heart. The theme is spread love, and she's really she knows that she has the platform to be that brand ambassador, to have those conversations and to make those connections. And I also know her heart. I know the tears that she's cried when she talked about watching George Floyd's video. I know the tears that she's cried when I asked her, but why now? And so, I think we just have to really be prepared that if you really want to go down this road, because it is a rabbit hole, but it's one worth going down, because at the end of the day, we're talking about human dignity. We're talking about kindness towards people. We're talking about supporting our children and future generations. And so we all have a responsibility in that.
Well
couldn't
said.
agree with you. Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. And hey, I'll add in the other voice there. Preach, Chandra, says Kiana. She's like the Kiana's like, she's too young to know this. Kiana's like the fifth Beatle, And we're all getting texts from her as this is going on.
Totally.
She wants to produce the next show of this. She's already telling me what I can do to promote it better and all that. And I'm just gonna hand it off and say, please. And I say that with all the love in the world, because she's amazing. Okay, Nicole, let's continue this discussion and what you've seen over these last 7 weeks in terms of progress. And I think just my 2 cents here, as Chandra's talking about this, I'm reminded that this doesn't all go away. A lifetime's worth and generations worth, we're not just talking about your lifetimes, of racism suddenly just goes away in 7 weeks. And I don't mean just making it better. I mean the feeling, the hurt, the pain of having that for a lifetime, and having watched, your parents and grandparents and all these generations. So where have we come in 7 weeks?
I share a little bit of Chandra's skepticism, but also her optimism. And you said it best when you mentioned Representative John Lewis. He lived his whole life fighting this cause, 60 plus years. And he helps me keep my foot on the gas and keep moving. And that's what I'm seeing from the allies. I see people willing to be vulnerable, willing to try, willing to learn, willing to make mistakes. And that's very challenging and different than what I've seen in the past. I've also seen really friends of mine, and these are friends that I've known for some time, so we have a relationship. But one of the most refreshing things is I have my mom tribe, the moms that have children in the same class as Rowan. And I mentioned doing a social justice book club. And in the past, if I mentioned something like that in any other circle, I would have been the one, the mom of color who would put it together, done the research, done all of the work, and then people would show up. And I mentioned the idea and everyone said yes. And then they said, what do you think of this? It was all put together by the rest of the tribe. It didn't fall on me as the person of color to lead. They led and then asked me some questions about vetting some of the books. But other than that, showing up in a space and making influence for our kids and saying, not only do I hear you, I'm alongside you, and what we've done has not been good enough. I feel a sense of urgency from allies that I haven't felt before, because I think it's real easy to acknowledge an issue, but then our default as human nature is to fall back into our comfort zone. I see people pushing in ways that I haven't before. And I'm really blessed to have a group of people who are committed to this work. I know that's not representative of everyone. And people's space on this journey varies, really. Some, I feel like, we're at 101, maybe not even at 101 when George Floyd died. And then there's some people who've been doing race and equity work for years who are just taking it to the next level. So knowing that people are on a continuum, but I see movement. When you say it's been 7 weeks, the amount of work that I've seen done, I dare say, I don't know, in this 7 weeks, I feel like more progress has been made than in the last 15 years of my life. And it's hard to quantify that, but that's just what it feels like. And so I'm hopeful. I think allies are asking the right questions. I also think as people of color, we are extending grace as we would hope others would extend us. There's people who are saying, Nicole, I don't want to hurt your feelings. I don't want to be offensive, but can I ask this? And I'm listening and they don't have to have the perfect words. I'm assuming good intention and then helping guide along the way. And then those are people who are already doing some work like Cass has talked about. So I'm hopeful, Joel, and as we continue these conversations, I hope if we come back and we bring our fifth Beatle in a year from now, that we are able to see even further growth and that we're continuing this. So thank you.
We could bring Kiana into this for sure. I mean, I think that there's more room for more boxes in here. So, I mean, why not?
We might have to bump André. I don't know, but.
Totally.
Come on.
Totally. I'll
never
sit in the studio with Joel.
He's royalty. You know he's royalty.
That's right. Yes, he is royalty.
But actually, I need at least one guy in here with me. I mean, I don't know if I can handle this on my own. But I would say Kiana would lower the age, the average age for us all very well.
True
so
story.
That we could sit there and say the average age of the group is. And so anyway, Andre, you see why if people could just see the emails that go back and forth with this group, you're all so much fun. It is like how many times leading up to today has there been someone saying, what a great way to start the morning, or oh, you guys are cracking me up. This just made my day. Which truthfully, and I'm just getting to know Nicole and Chandra a little bit more over the last couple of months. I'm just getting to know Cass. I've got a great comfort level and a friendship with Andre, but that helps. I mean, and even everything, Andre, with this white allyship, which I think you or somebody might have created that word, because I think it doesn't pass spell check, but you know what? By next year, it could be in Webster's dictionary. Who knows? You know what? I work with Rex Hudler every night. He says words that nobody knows what they mean, but they know what they mean. So we can create whatever we want.
Right.
But But and I would say, Hud, if you're watching, you know I love you, but he's not watching. He wouldn't know how to find it. And he was a guest last week too. Okay, I'm getting off track, but Andre, let's talk about this because these conversations are increasing. What have you seen in the last 7 weeks? I've got to imagine I'm not the only one that you had a deep conversation with.
You're the only white person I know, so you're the only one I've had a conversation. So that is in true fact. No. I think,
hey, you're in construction. That's not true.
That is absolutely not true. No, I would mirror everything what everyone else has said. Is that I think the conversation has picked up. The challenge that is before us is, do we get fatigued or do we stay the course? Right? There's easy to get fatigued in this moment. You're sitting in your room, you see a lot of people activating, doing their thing, white, young, brown, black, doing their thing. You're like, you know what, they have it. And I'm telling you not to think that way. Don't get fatigued, stay the course. And I had a thought when we were approaching this moment, and I noticed when Nicole brought up George Floyd, did anyone else find it odd that, and I want to be careful about this, but did anyone find it odd if we go back to Michael Vick, and how Michael Vick was brutalized in the media about what he did to dogs? And I'm not condoning that, but I'm making a correlation. The same activists for animals were super quiet about George Floyd. That stuck out to me. And so when we talk about shared humanity, what seems to happen is when we see people that are brown and black being oppressed or violently attacked, somehow we think, yeah, maybe they earned it. And so until we get out of that moment, we have a lot of work to do. And what I would challenge all the animal activists, I have a dog, I get it. But for me, if you're going to speak out about a dog that was brutalized and be quiet about a man that was murdered, then you are part of the problem and you don't know it. And so when we say own your own criticism, don't make it about yourself, look at that correlation and go, did I do that? And if you did that, do something about it so that you don't do it again, is what we're asking. And so I think we've all seen on the national stage, even if you look at the NBA last night, when everyone had on Black Lives Matter, everyone took a knee. The referees took a knee. The coaches took the knee. The popcorn guy had a knee and eating popcorn. I mean, everybody was taking a knee, right? When we think about that, that's progress we're talking about. And that's leadership too, because Adam Silver, he was okay with that. We have to get everybody else on board that taking a knee doesn't mean we disrespect the flag. And that's a whole different conversation that I don't want to go down, because we still can't get people to understand that we're called attention and it's peaceful. And so I think there is certainly work to do. And I appreciate every ally, brown, black, white, or indifferent, that is using their voice, because I'm seeing a lot of people that are not brown and black, post them in digital, they're vocal. And what I would tell, Nicole made me think of something about the boardroom when you said you had the idea and somebody stood up. What I would tell people, when you walk into a room and you see people that always look like you, and you see somebody else that doesn't look like you, get away from everyone else that looks like you and go introduce yourself to someone that doesn't look like you. And you'll be amazed at what happens from that. And I think until we start seeing that, even in the corporate world, boardrooms, nonprofit leadership rooms, we're going to have work to do. And that's just recognizing that we all have bias. And oftentimes it's easy. And this is a thing that us men of color do. And I think women of color do this, but I think I see more men of color doing this. When we see another man of color in a room, we throw our head up, right? And we're like, hey, okay, there's somebody else there that looks like me. So we have to do that on the other side. We got to be able to make sure that we're embracing humanity the same. And we're helping people. And if we see someone that's being, brutalized or treated differently, you have to say something. Joe, you have the privilege of being around baseball. There was a time baseball wasn't very diverse. Baseball is super diverse. So you have a different perspective because you live that. Some folks don't live it. And what we're asking you to do is to step out of your comfort zone. And like Nicole said, we shouldn't have to educate you to the degree that we're giving you a degree. You ought to be able to do your own homework and be interested enough. And that's when we said, and I like what Nicole said about the accomplice, right? Because that means you did something. And that's what you have to be. You have to start your education, but then ask questions, and we're good with that. And I think we have shown a lot of people a lot of grace. So let's continue to talk. I think everyone on the panel is open to a discussion. We want to continue to have the discussion. We certainly, when you're talking about whether or not you're going to open up your company to hire more people, none of us want to be hired because we fit a box of brown and black. We want the door to open wide enough so that we are considered because we have a certain skill set and talent. That's what we want. And the challenge today is sometimes those doors are not open, they're cracked, and people that are not brown and black slide through, and then brown and black people never see the door open. So we're trying to open that door a little wider.
And, you know, I would think that at heart, the flip side of that is that no one wants to check a box on the other side hiring either, right? And so sometimes to me, it might just be a matter of once you start to meet other people, it opens up other doors. So an amazing thing happened, and I don't know that I've mentioned this to any of you guys, but I looked recently at my show list, and you know, I send out the calendar invites and all that type of stuff, and so I lose track of who's coming on when if I book it, you know, a handful of weeks in advance. And I looked, and I had 5 out of 6 guests, so spanning over the course of 2 weeks, were African American, and it was never by design. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that I had ever had a schedule like that with this podcast, and we're just talking over, you know, 3.5, 4 months. That was not, ooh, let me get this person on to talk about race, and let's keep doing this. I just looked down, and that's what it was. Yeah. And now I don't know if that is wrong for me to have noticed that, but to me it felt like that just happened organically, and to me that was a sign of progress of, and I would say this, by the way, for any group, not even based on race or religion, I mean, maybe just profession or whatever it is, that suddenly my network was expanding. And so when you expand your network and you get out of that box, we all put ourselves in a box in some form or another, I believe. When you start to expand that, suddenly other doors begin to open. So that was just my observation here. And you know, I think, and Cass, I want to ask you this. I mean, I'm glad that we all met, I think, a week ago to discuss what we wanted to talk about. Because the reality of it is there's not just one big master box to check off, okay, racial injustice, right? If we were a little bit more general last time, now we focused on allyship. But Cass, these discussions can go in a million directions, I would think. And so what are the keys to keep this going? What are the keys to not just check that box, and different ways that we could further this where people are still engaged?
Joel, okay, I want to answer that question, but you said something that gave me a memory about a conversation I was having with a white ally. And I think that we might all feel a little bit differently about this, but I think it's an important conversation to have. We're talking about checking boxes and the term African American, which for me, I personally don't like. I'm simply a Black woman. I'm not an African American. And I say that because I feel like there's a psychology behind that. If you understand the systems of oppression and Asian American in terms like that, they're a way to further take away the value of a person, I believe, just because of the connotation that is subscribed to Africa. It's not my own. It's just the history. It's what it is. And, you know, Asians. And so I simply prefer to be called a Black person. And I'm very curious to know how Chandra and Nicole and Andre feel about that, or if they're indifferent.
Yeah, you know what? I'm so glad you brought that up, and then we'll get back to what I was doing. By the way, there's no, as you guys know, we'll go where this goes. Yeah. I've been meaning to ask some of my Black friends that, because I think that as a white person, for a stretch of time, for many, many years, it was, okay, African American is the proper terminology, Black is not, and lately I've noticed it more, and I've always wondered that too, Cass, because that's labeling everybody as having African roots, and what I'm seeing is more people more comfortable with just, hey, I'm Black. But that's a difficult one, Nicole, because what Cass says here may be different than what you or Chandra or Andre or anybody else says. So to Cass's question, one, where do you stand on this? And two, what's the right way to go about that for someone that's white? Because for someone like me, I wanna be respectful.
I think that's such a good question. And as we've mentioned before, Black people are not a monolith. So what we're sharing is from our individual experiences. And so it's nuanced at best. And that's why we have this question. I prefer Black as well. I think it's mostly because that's what I was referred to growing up. And then it's been more recent, maybe half and half of my life, Black and then African American in terms of societal. But even when our society switched to African American, that was my professional way of addressing my culture. In home or with friends, I would just say Black. So it was kind of this code switching, but Black is my default. It's not by accident that I think Black has risen to the surface again, because as we're having more authentic conversations and peeling away these layers, I think that's what's more authentic. Also, Black speaks to a broader scope of our population. I think that's more inclusive. My mom is from Jamaica. If someone is actually an immigrant from Africa and not a descendant of slaves that were brought to the United States, I mean, it's complicated. And where I found where it made no sense, I was speaking about someone who was Black, who was from England, and I was in a professional setting, and I said African American, just thinking of it as a euphemism for Black. And I was like, wait, they're not even American. So right. Black is the one that makes the most sense of most comfort to me personally, but as a white person, sometimes you just have to listen and see how people refer to themselves and self-identify.
You just made me think of something. A number of years ago, I was working at a TV station, and one of my colleagues who was Black made some comment about a Hall of Fame hockey player named Grant Fuhr. He was one of the greatest goaltenders in the history of the NHL. And he said something about he was the first African-American, blah, blah, blah. This was a Black man saying this. And I'm like, well, first off, he's Canadian, so he can't be African-American to start with. So, I mean, it's just a little bit of a reminder of how wrong, I guess, that label can be. And maybe, Chandra, I don't know. I mean, you're not going to sit there before you talk to every one of your Black friends. And by the way, that could be a Black person talking to a Black person saying, do you prefer Black or do you prefer African-American? But I wonder if maybe it's just best for me to go in with the default of, hey, if it comes up, this person is Black, unless you hear them referring to themselves as African-American. That's just what I'm thinking right now. But what's your take on this?
So Cass said something earlier that was really profound, and I think we sometimes miss this. Ask about a person's background, don't assume. So I think in this situation, you need to take the time to talk to them and to get to know them, to know how they identify. So I also identify as Black, but as Nicole said, in professional settings, I too code switch and default to African American. And it's something that I'm really holding myself accountable to now, because I really want to be respectful of everyone's background and how they identify. So it's a great question. And I think, as Black women, we also find ourselves, and Black men, we find ourselves in the workplace or in professional settings, sometimes just trying to keep the peace. Yeah. I know I do. I'll be the first one to admit that. So I'll use terms and terminology and try to address situations in a peaceful way. But I really think that it's also time for me to become uncomfortable in that, because it's time for me to change how I've been conducting myself just to be PC.
Yeah, we all so often are guilty of living in that PC world. It's speaking up, right? It's knowing that you have a voice. Okay, Andre, same question to you in terms of the terminology.
Yeah, I thought I was Dominican, so my Latinx brothers and sisters, just forgive me. I have been accused of being Dominican because of my hue, but I've never been hung up on the African American term. I remember working with a lady who was white, and I was single at the time, and she wanted to connect me with someone that was at her church. And she's like, well, Andre, I've got this lady, she's African, and she kind of stumbled. And I said, oh, she's Black. You can say Black. I'm good with that, right? So I think I'm good with Black, and I think for me personally, where I get and I'm okay with African Americans, we certainly have descendants that were from Africa. But Black is fine, and I don't think people need to be awkward about it. And you still see it today, whether it's a corporate setting or someone you've met or whatever. People will stumble. Do I say African American? Do I say Black? You can say Black. You can say African American. For me, I don't have a choice either way for me. But I think we're all in agreement that we code it. We're bilingual with it. If the situation calls, but I think also you can get caught up in assuming that everyone you meet is African American, and then you find out they're not even from Africa. They're from a whole different country, Europe, France, whatever the case might be. And they might have descendants that hailed from Africa. Because don't forget that France had a lot of slaves migrate to France. And so I remember my daughter who went to Academy Lafayette, I was talking to one of her teachers. He was from Cameroon. I put my foot in my mouth because what I did is I asked him, I said, where did you learn your language? And he said, my first language is French. And so we forget some of that history. And so we just have to be careful. And I think Chandra said it, and Nicole said it too. Get to know somebody. Why even worry about the color, right? Why does that come up? I mean, we don't meet white people and go, hey, where are you from? Are you from Ireland? Or we don't ever do that. So why even do it with people of color? Just get to know somebody, acknowledge we're of color, but get beyond that first level and get deep and try to figure out what we do, what we're about, and just take some time to get to know people. And I think sometimes we are always making prejudgments on people, and we assume without asking, and we get lazy in that. And I think we just got to get better at getting back. And the people that do that really well are kids. They don't care, man. They're just hanging out. They're doing their thing. And then all of a sudden an adult gets in the room and influences that decision, and it becomes a learned decision. You're not born to be that way. Don't let anyone tell you that way. There's not one kid that came out of the womb and said the N-word. They're never going to do that, right? So we have to understand that that's a learned behavior. Adults, get out the way, let kids interact with kids. And quite frankly, sometimes I'd rather be around children because to see them kind of do their thing, and it's pretty damn cool. But Black, African American, it doesn't matter to me. It really doesn't.
I think, get to know people and listen has been the really strong message that we have heard here. Okay, we're going to go around the horn for one final thought before we wrap up. I do need to push this comment out there, too, because you want to talk about an ally. There's no better ally than Courtney and what she does for the community. I had her on last week, and I've told her this privately, too. I mean, the chance to work with her, any opportunity I have is always a blessing, and because she makes people's lives better. So, Courtney, thanks for chiming in there. Let's go around the horn. Final thought, wherever you want to go as we wrap things up, this conversation about allyship. You can, I won't even ask the question, however you want to sum it up or whatever's on your mind. We'll start with the person with the title in front of their name, so that would be Dr. Butler.
I love it. No, you're Dr. Butler.
Okay, all right, Dre. I think that I'd sum it up by saying to, Black and brown and white allies, don't get comfortable. Don't get caught up in the moment. Check yourself, think about why this is important to you, to us as humanity. And, I'm in this space where, this influencer space where a lot of white women, white men kind of got on the box and wanted to silence themselves to amplify Black voices. And then they kind of went about to business as usual. And that was a little bit disheartening for me. So I think that it should not be for the applause. It should not be for allyship to check a box, as you said so well, Joel, but it should be because the cause is important, because we see what happens when we're silent. And there's just no more time or space for silence. And I think that we should allow each other to dialogue healthily and keep this conversation going.
All right, let's kick it over to Chandra. How about a final thought from you?
My final thought is do what is right, but do what is uncomfortable. I'll say it again and again. I'm an advocate for people healing from trauma. And for you to really heal from a wound, you have to get deep down in it. And sometimes it's icky and it's uncomfortable, but there is beauty on the other side. So to all of us, whether it's our white allies, like Cass said, black and brown, we have work to do. It's time to be uncomfortable, but it's time to do what's right. So we're really about change. Change is uncomfortable, and the time is now, but we all have a responsibility in this.
Nicole?
It's time to heal. It's time to heal.
Sean, sorry to cut you off, Chandra. Beautifully said. Nicole, I'll let you follow up on that.
Yes, really, I just echo what Dr. Cass and Chandra said. So well said. And what I think is we just have to keep going and let Mr. Floyd's death and Representative John Lewis's legacy not be in vain. That anti-racism work is not trendy, and it isn't something that's new. It may be new to some people's consciousness and awareness, but it's the skin in which we live and the life experiences that we have held for generations. If not now, I don't know when. If this isn't the catalyst to keep moving, and while I complimented the last 7 weeks, please know that's not enough. That is just the start and of a very long journey, but that we have to be committed to this journey and say that it is worth it for the next generations, as Chandra said. So thank you for inviting us today.
Well, we'll keep doing it. If you guys want to keep showing up, I'll keep asking the question. I don't even need to ask a lot of questions. Just, let's discuss. Yeah. Andre, final word for you.
Well, it won't be a word. It'll be a series of words. So here's what I would say to and I love being with these group. These ladies are awesome people, man, just to know. If you don't know them, you should get to know them. So here's what I'll say. Mm-hmm. Think about your niece, your kids, your grandparents, your friend's niece. If you don't have kids, think about other people's kids. If they asked you in this moment, what did you do for social justice? What would your answer be? Right? Think about that in this moment. Think about that answer. And what would your answer be? And if your answer is, I don't know, it's kind of figure it out. That's probably not what you envision saying to someone you really care about and love and you want to impact. So those would be my final words. Just think about, if you were asked those questions, what would your answer be?
That's rich.
Yeah, that is rich, and it's a lot to think about. Well, it's been another really productive conversation. I knew it would be, and I think we had a decent amount of time on this one. It'll never be enough, and so we'll keep doing these. If you guys want to keep having them, we'll add in the fifth Beatle too, if you guys want to do that, and let's just keep building off of this. So I'm grateful to all of you for spending the time, for helping make me better to hopefully have the tools to go out there and be an ally. I know the more people involved, the more people pulling in the same direction, the more we can chip away at something that has gone on for generations. So, Dr. Cass Butler, Nicole Silvey, Chandra Clark, André Davis, I'm grateful to all of you. Thank you for spending the time, and I hope you guys all have a great Friday and a great weekend too.
Thank you, Joel. Good to see everybody. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, so that was awesome. And I would ask everyone, and I know that my panel will do this too, there'll be a YouTube link that's out there, and certainly it's on Facebook and all those places. Just share this. I think the best way to continue to have this progress is to have these conversations and share them with other people, and then talk about it afterwards and have these discussions. So that's going to do it for another episode of Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. #No Stopping You. Thanks to KCAV for the Studio Kansas City audio visual, and thanks to all of you for watching. I hope that you were able to get something or a lot out of this. My name is Joel Goldberg. Royals baseball tonight on Fox Sports Kansas City all weekend long. Have a great weekend, everybody, and I hope to see you Monday on Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust.